Hello and welcome to my NextJS Fullstack course. In this tutorial slash course, we're gonna be diving a lot deeper into the Next.js side of things, and super excited to finally bring it to you guys. And a little bit of a roadmap, what we are going to do. We are going to be going over some Next.js features. I know a lot of you guys are excited about the new 13.4 features that they introduced, and we're going to be specifically looking into that side of things, and then we'll do a quick crash course of applying those into the code, of having those features, how it look like in the code, how you write those features, and then we're going to build a really awesome full stack application with Next.js and MongoDB as our database. And we will be using server action as well, which is a really cool feature that Next.js added. So we will be fetching some data using server action, and all the new features we will be using that as well. So quick intro on that. Let's get started. So first thing first, why learn Next.js? Now, this is a really, I think, a really big framework right now. Like even if you go to React documentation, they say you don't want to use Create React App, you want to use Next.js. Like it's a really big deal right now. And I think if you learn this right now, you are going to be almost future proof. Like a lot of jobs in the future will be using Next.js. A lot of companies switched to Next.js recently, and they're always doing that because how powerful the system is and all the features they offer. I think is really the perfect time to learn this framework and build as much project as you can, and hopefully land a job with using Next.js. So if you already have a job with Next.js, well, that's a good thing. So I think this is going to be a really nice refresher for you. So other than that, I think it's the best framework to learn right now. So definitely learn Next.js. Now, I designed this course using very simple steps. So I'm not sure you were familiar with me or not. Like I make tutorials that are like very straight to the point. I don't like babble or talk about other stuff. It's like very fine tuned for your learning experience. So once you watch my tutorial, you should always have like a good idea what you get out of it. So in this course, I want to make sure you understand Next.js fully, and you have all the skills you need to build a Next.js app with full confidence. So I made a roadmap for this, and this is the learning path for success. First, we're gonna tackle SSR versus CSR versus ISR. Now, this is a very crucial topic because Next.js does all of these and a little bit of variation as well. So I think understanding the server-side rendering, client-side rendering, and incremental side rendering is really important, and a very strong start will give you a very strong start. And then I'll look into the server component. Next.js recently changed their pages router to something called an app router, and everything inside that is basically a server component. So by default, you can change it to a client component if you want, but it's server component right out the box. We're going to talk about a little bit of that as well. And then we're going to jump into routes and layout. This is more like the router, how it's designed, how the app is laid out, the structure, how you write the files, where you want to structure the file, and how you navigate. So we will look into that as well. And it also add a lot of advantages and new features like React Suspense and some error handling. Made it really easy to do that as well. So we're going to look at that. Number 4 is going to be some data fetching. Now this is where things get really interesting because Next.js recently released something called server action. It's in alpha mode right now, so they're currently working on it. They still haven't released it in the beta yet. It's in alpha mode right now. You can use it, and when we build the full stack application, there's a part of the app where I use server component, and it's actually a game changer. It makes things so much easier to write. We don't have to write a lot of different use state, handling use state. It's just straight up, you take the form data and you just update your database in MongoDB straight up, instead of storing those data and then updating it to MongoDB. So server action is the way to go. We're gonna look into that as well. Number five is streaming and suspense. Now this is where the layout and the routes come in a little bit. They kind of added the React suspense right on top of it. So that means if you were writing React, plain React, you have to configure where you want to use the React suspense, where you want to do other things like that, error handling, error boundary. But with Next.js, they made this really simple. Like you don't have to do any configuration. All you have to do is name a file, create a file, and that's it. The Next.js will handle the React suspense and error boundary behind the scene for you. So Next.js knows when to do that and will serve up to you. So zero configuration, you just easily do streaming and suspense, making your app more error proof and more faster, and elevate the user experience as well. So the last part is going to be the SEO. Next.js kind of made a little bit nice configuration on the SEO as well. You can do dynamic SEO, you can do static SEO, making your content more discoverable on the search engine. So I think after that, we will have a very strong foundation to tackle a full stack application. Once we do 1 to 6, we're going to jump into building a full stack application with MongoDB, TailwindCSS, and all the other stuff, and make it more rich, very high content full stack application. I'm super excited for that. But before I do that, I want to talk about a free guide that I'm giving away. Now, this is totally free. I made it all by myself, and it have all the information that I just talked a little bit earlier, 1 to 6. All the points are in here, and it's with pull-on diagram for you to understand how Next.js work, and it's completely free. I'm giving it away. Go to that link below and grab that free guide. Just put in your email and you will have the free guide sent to you. It's a great guide to have it handy. If you are interviewing with a Next.js company in the future, you can just skim to this guide and have it all down and ready to go. So grab that, and next I'm going to jump over and show you the application that we will be building. So here is the full stack application that we will be building a little bit shortly after we finish the crash course. So this is a full stack application. Find the most popular AI prompt. I know right now ChatGPT is like really popular at the moment, and I think creating something a bit like Reddit and a bit like Twitter is a really nice app meshed together. And I created something like that, and this is the app called Promptify. This is basically you sign in and you can like upvote prompt. You can find the prompt that is more productive, that is helpful, and you can upvote those prompts and it will populate how you upvote. And yeah, so a couple of features just to sign in, and I will show you. So I have my account right here. I sign in. We have nice UI in here. We have logo, Navbar, create prompt, and profile and logout. You can also see we built almost like a search bar here, and then we have some prompt here. So you can upvote certain prompt that this one not upvoted, so I'm gonna upvote that as well. So you see we have chat GPT or AI prompt. We have like some tag. You can search using some tag. Let's say Spanish. It brings me the Spanish prompt. We can do Next.js, bring the Next.js. You can do resume. We have resume prompt, and then we have we can also search using bullet points. So let's type in bullet points, and it brought me this prompt. So which is cool. You can go to the profile. You can see all your prompt in here. You can delete it. You can also see when you go to the main page, you have the delete on some of this prompt. That means that prompt is yours. So you can go ahead and maybe delete one of these or two. Let's delete that. That's deleted. Now I can also go back here and create how to use server action in Next.js here, and enter. We created a prompt here, how to use server action in Next.js, and this is 0 right now, so I'm going to upvote that myself. It's pretty cool. So one thing I want to talk about is we are using NextAuth for the authentication and the logout, sign in, NextAuth with connecting to Google Auth as well. So you can log in using Google account. And for the create prompt, this is the most fun part, I think. We are using server action on the form. So to explain you guys a little bit, server action really cleans up a lot of the code. Before server action, you have to grab what you type in here, you have to grab what you type in here, store it into a use state, and then you have to do a post request. But with server action, you don't need to store what you write, whatever you write in the use state. You can just, no more use state, you can just straight up grab this, whatever you type, and just post it into the database. And it will see, when I click enter, it will automatically update my database, and my database will have whatever I type in. So super fast, super efficient. It's like cleans up a lot of the code that we previously used to write. So really great feature we'll be working on in here, and I can't wait for you guys to get started. But before we build this full stack application, let's go on and see what NextJS crash course is about. Okay, so we're back here on the slides. Again, one more time, go to the link down below, grab the guide. It will be super helpful for you. So without any further ado, let's go back to our presentation. Now, this is where the fun part begins, where we start learning everything about NextJS, and we make sure we'll know what we're talking about, how NextJS work under the hood, so we can go ahead and build that full stack application. So first thing out of the way is going to be SSR versus CSR versus ISR. Now, what these words mean. For those of you who are new, SSR stand for server-side rendering. Now, what is server-side rendering and why it is very important? This is one of the most important concepts when you're like doing NextJS, because NextJS renders on the server by default, and this is how it's going to load up most of your pages, unless you tell them that you want some client-side rendering. So first thing first, you go to a browser, you type in nextjs.com, and then it requests the data to the server. The server, what it does is grab whatever files it needs, and then it renders that file in the server. So the nextjs.com page is rendered on the server, and everything loads up on the server, and then server sends the rendered page response to the browser. And then the browser just opens up and it's like, okay, it's the render page, and it just shows you the rendered page. So the browser doesn't do much work. Most of the work is done on the server. So you kind of have a couple of different advantages, like SEO. All the page is already loaded on the server, so that means all your text is generated already in the server. So once the browser just shows the page, the search engine can crawl through those text, and it kind of like gives you a really nice SEO advantages. It's also super fast when rendering. So SSR is definitely the way to go, and NextJS, if you create a file in NextJS, it's going to be server rendered. Besides server-side rendering, we have another type of rendering, which is called client-side rendering. Now, what does it do? So this is a little bit different than the server side we previously saw. This one requests the data. When you go to a nextjs.com, the server grabs the pages required, and then it sends the pages. So it doesn't load the pages. It doesn't render the pages on the server. It just grabs the pages and send it to the browser. So that's it does. It's not doing too much. The server just sees that you need this HTML, you need this CSS. Okay, here you go. This is the file you need. And it sends to the browser, and the browser does most of the work. So browser loads and render the page that you received from the server. So browser gets a little slow at this point. There's not much interactive. It just loads a blank page. It just loads whatever it got in the first, and then it slowly starts loading JavaScript so you can interact with the pages. So client-side rendering have its advantages and disadvantages. Like if you're using client-side rendering, you're not gonna get a lot of SEO power rich feature But with server side, if SEO is important, you might want to stick with server side on that particular page. But if you want a lot of interactivity in your site, you need client-side rendering because it loads up on the browser and the client can start playing with it. So there's a lot of different things involved in the client side, like React Suspense, error boundary, to help retain some of the time lost when the browser load the pages, because your browser is doing a lot of heavy lifting. So if you render the page on the browser, you might lose some of those time. So there's a couple of tricks you can do to make it more interactive. That's a big thing to understand. Once you have those two down, you are pretty much, I would say, you have like a base down there. So once you have understand those two concepts, you're good. Next, we're gonna look at a little bit of experimental feature, which is incremental server render. This is like fetch and update data, update part of the site without rebuilding the entire site. So you want to fetch and update just a part of the data, part of the component, and not the whole page, which is where this comes in. And you can set this up by revalidating time to fetch and update part of the site. NextJS offer a lot of cool features in that sense. And yep, I think this is a good place. And I'm going to move on to the next part where we're going to talk about is server component. So once we have these three concepts understood, now next we're going to tackle something called server component. Now, server component is really big in Next.js. And why? Because everything inside your app is basically going to be server component. That means, like we talked about on SSR, is going to be rendered on the server. So Next.js is very SSR by default. So everything you create is going to be server component by default, unless you tell the file that is a client component. So Next.js takes the approach of the server first. That means by default, all components are server component. So let's jump into the code base and show you guys these 2 points I talked about and touch on it a little bit in the code sense. So you have visual understanding where things are. So in here on my VS Code right now, we're going to be starting installing our Next.js application. And we do that by typing npx create next app at latest. I'm gonna click enter. It's going to say we're going to install this. I'm going to say yes. Name of the project would be NextJS crash course. I don't want to use TypeScript. No, yes, clean. We don't need TailwindCSS for this crash course. We're going to use Tailwind for the full stack. So I'm going to say no. No, in here, app router is the recommended way. So we're going to do that. And then import analysis, no. Now we have done, I'm going to do is cd into that file. And then open the code in there. All right, so we are now officially in our Next 13 application. And it's a good time to start looking around and see where things are a little bit. So you see we have package.json, we have next config, which is cool. We have JS config and ignore public in here. And this is where the main project lives. Now, first thing first, I'm going to do is npm run dev to start the server. So I started my server and this is what it looked like. Now, first thing I'm going to do is talk to you guys about like the point we just talked about, right? We did talk about SSR, CSR, and server component. So I want to touch upon only those topics. So you have like a good understanding of those fundamentals, and then we're gonna move on to the next topic. So first thing, let's see what we can talk about. Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of routing in here. So I'm gonna go over that as well. So let's create a file called product, and in here we're gonna create something called page.js. Or JSX, whatever you prefer. I'll do JSX in here. So this is the app router. So Next.js does things by something called app router. So that means everything inside app is basically a router, kind of like a React router. And then this is the index page. So this is going to be your index page in here. So when you hit this link, it will go to this page. This is the product page, which is when you go to this link on the website, product, it will go to this page. And you have to be naming convention, be aware of the naming convention. It should say page.jsx. Now if I say something RAFCE and type in product page, this is a product page, right? Let's go back to our application and go to the product here. You see, we're going to the product page, which is right here. Now, we created a page. Now, remember I talked to you guys about the server-side component. Now, this is a server-side component, or like server component. So this is being rendered on the server. Now, why is that? Because how do we know? If we do a console login here, rendered on server, you see, you get a console log on the console because this is the server. You don't get a console log in here. There's nothing coming in here. I refresh, nothing comes in here. You'll get console log on the server. So it's server component. It's rendering on the server. Now, what if we want to use effect? Let's say, not that, let's do use state, any React hook. If when you use any React hook, it's basically not going to work on the server. So let's do name, set name is equal to nothing for now. And let's see what it says. We created a use state on the server component, and our browser is saying some error. Like you're importing a component that needs use state. It only works in client component, but none of its parents are marked use clients. So they are server component by default. So like we talked about server component in NextJS, everything is server component. So this is a server component by default, and this won't work. This use state won't work because it only work on the client component. So if you are using use state, you want to make sure you turn this into use client. Now this, when you say this on the very top of the file, it will become a client component. We did that and use client on the top of the page. Notice what happened. That error is gone. So that means you're using this as a client component right now. It's not a server component anymore, and it's happening on the client, which is pretty cool. So here you see, you get console log rendered on the client. Yep, so this is rendered on client right now, not on the server. So we have rendering on the client. So this is good. So that's the difference between server component and a client component. By default, any page you create inside the app router or app folder is going to be a server component by default. But if you're using use state, you want to make sure you use client on the top. Now, NextJS have some really cool rule, which I'm going to show you guys right now. So let's go back to the slides and show you guys when to use server component versus client component. Because if you are not sure, you're going to get error like we ran into. When you're fetching data, when you're accessing backend resources, when you're keeping some sensitive API key token or using those, or large dependency, when you want to use some large dependencies on the server, you want to use server component. That is by default. But if you're using interactivity like on click, on change, use state, use reducer, or any kind of like a hook, lifecycle hooks, use browser APIs, and any custom hooks or class component, you want to use client component, which is on the first of the line, you say use client in quotation, and the file will become a client component and it will load in the client instead of the server. So that's a really big part that's been taken care of. I think you guys really understood what I was trying to say and explain. If you have a good understanding on that, make sure you give a thumbs up. I'm like working really hard to bring this tutorial to you guys and make sure you guys understand every single bit of it. So comment down below, leave a thumbs up, and make sure you grab that fee guide that I'm giving away as well. It's super helpful to have all of these things in handy with a lot of cool diagrams. So next thing we're going to look at is point number 3, which is routes and layout. I think really easy part of the tutorial. We're going to jump back to the VS Code. This is where we left off. So routes and layouts, right? Everything inside the app is basically our route, or that's why they call it the app router. And in the app router, you have all the routes in here. The page refer to the index page. So we go to the index page. We kind of like delete everything in here, right? And index page in here. Index page. Cool. Okay. And then we have the layout. So layout is a really nice part of the whole app, is where you lay things out in here. Like let's say we create a navbar in here. This is a navbar. Let's put in the body in here. There we go. And this will affect all the pages. So yep, we have the navbar in there. And then if you go to the product page that we created before, you can see we have the navbar as well. So it's kind of the main source to design the website. You can have like a footer, you can have a navbar, and children is basically all the pages in between. So every time you create a page, this is basically the children that's root layout is taking and is injecting in here, and anything you create beside that is going to be your own made up navigation and footer part there. So that's that. I think you should have a good idea on here. You can also create a layout internally. So if you have a product page in here, we can also create a layout in here. CSX, and I'll create a product layout. And here, this one takes a children, and we're going to index the children in here as well. So similar to kind of like a root layout that was created. And you can see when I go back to the browser, you see we have a product layout. But notice one thing, the product layout doesn't appear on the main page because it's internally. It's only inside that route. So this is how the routes and layout are progressed in Next.js. Yeah, that's the basic of layout and route. And if you want to create more routes, you can do that too. If you have like another route, for example, about page, and if you create something called page in there, and we create about page, and we can go to about, we have about page right there. So that's it. Going back to the slides. So next we're going to be talking about data fetching. There's a lot of cool parts about data fetching in Next.js. So diving back into the VS Code. So a little bit of a talk to data fetching. Next.js wants you to follow some guide when doing some data fetching, right? They want you to do data fetching on the server component. That means no like a use client. You want to fetch data in any kind of a server component, and they also want you to do is fetch data parallel to minimize some loading times. So if you do it on the server component, it will automatically reduce some loading time for you and gives you a really good user experience. For layout and pages, you want to data fetch wherever it's necessary. Like you can also data fetch in the layout and then push those data into the children or into some component on the layout as well. And they also give you some tools to enhance the data fetching, like streaming and suspense. We're going to get to that in the next slides. But for now, let's look into the data fetching a little bit. So how do we data fetch in Next.js? Let's create a component. So when we're creating component on Next.js, the best way to do it is create a component folder out of the app, because you don't want your component inside the app. It gets really clunky. So you want to keep component a little separated. Let's create something called product. This is our product component. Cool. And in the product component, we're going to fetch some data. The first thing first, we are going to make this an async function, and we are going to be fetching some data in here. So await fetch, and we're going to do is HTTP. Now this is fake data, so everyone can basically fetch this data and show some product on your app. So we are fetching some data in here, which is good. And now we're doing is product is equal to await rest.json. So we have a JSON data in here. Next thing I want to do is I want to console log these products. So products data is products. So I need to load this as well. So grab that. I'll load it into the main page and product. There you go. We have a product component. Let's go back to our home page and we get our data back in our server. So notice one thing on the product component, that we are not using any use state or any kind of use effect, because we want to keep this a server component. Because if you use state or use effect or anything, you have to change this into client component. So this way, this is only happening on the server and you're getting console log on the server, and it's following the NextJS guideline, which is keeping it on the server and also helps to reduce loading time and a lot of different things that comes with it. Now, this fetch, one thing to note is a NextJS fetch API. Now, this is built on top of the native fetch. So that means you can also do a lot of cool things with this fetch. Like if we want to do some next revalidate, we can do revalidate. Every 60 seconds, you have revalidation. Like by default, if you don't have that, NextJS would automatically cache this data and it will become stale after a certain period of time. But if you don't want to, if you want to revalidate every 60 seconds, you want to have this, because this way, if something new happens on the data, it will revalidate the data and it will override the cache. So that way you have fresh data coming in all the time. So this is a really cool feature that I talked about in the ISR program, ISR slide, where if you want to use some fetching data, certain component fetch data in certain period of time, and it's dynamic, this is where you use the ISR incremental server rendering. This is how you do it, and it helps you a lot. So this is a cool feature on the Next.js side of things. Let's kind of do some regular mapping stuff in here. So we're going to map some data so we can see what we did in here. Let's make it more interactive. So we're going to do a div. And is equal to product.id. And here we're going to do just simple, nothing too fancy, so you can see what we are seeing. So we have all the product description in here, and we're getting the data pretty quickly, which is cool. If this data has something new, it will revalidate and we will have some new data in here too. But we don't have any new data. This is like a static data, so that's why we are not seeing any effect on the next revalidation, but it is working. This, I think, should give you a really good idea on when to use some data. I also want to talk to you about some server component data fetching. Now, if you use client side, I mean, we all use React before, and when you fetch a data on React, you use something called use effect. And those are basically happening on the client side. You're fetching the data on the client side, and there could be some disadvantage to it. With server component data fetch, you have something that I want to talk to you about, is that you have direct access to the database. That means you're getting really fresh data. You also have more secure application by securing sensitive API keys. on the database. If this is all happening on the server, so client is not able to interact with everything that's happening on the server, and it also happen very close to the data region you have in nearby. So it's a little faster that way, and SEO has been very important. So if we have something that is very SEO like advantage, you want to use something like this on the server component data fetch. That way you have SEO generated and you have better search engine SEO optimization. Now, another point I want to bring out is the server action. Now, this is the big topic, and I want to bring in some uh, bring in to action. Okay, so that's out of the way. The next thing I want to talk to you about, Next.js have some uh, recommendation, like you fetch data on a server. What if you don't want to fetch data on a server? What if you want to fetch data on the client side? You can use effect and all that, but the most recommended way is using something called SWR or React Query to kind of like have more feature on your hand to fetch data on the client side. So that's the takeaway. You always want to fetch data on the server side. If not, you can fetch on the client side, but you might get some disadvantage with it. The next point I want to talk about is the last point on the data fetching. Is called server action. I'm pulling it right here. So server action is currently in the alpha phase in Next.js, built on top of React Action. So they enable server-side data mutation, reduce client-side JavaScript, and progressively enhance form. Now, in this full stack application we're gonna build in a couple of minutes, we are going to be using server action, and it's like a game changer. The form handling gets so much easier. So I can't wait to show you guys this action in action. But right now, we're going to be just overviewing the basic data fetching. This will be shown on the full stack application that we will build. So stay tuned for that, and we will go over that shortly. So off to number 5. This is where we're going to be talking about streaming and suspense. Now, a lot of people might be, what does this mean? Go over that in a little bit. So jump back into the code. So back to the code, I want to talk to you about a little bit about the streaming and suspense side of things. Now, when I talked about routes and layout, Next.js does a really awesome job in this term, and they kind of like nail everything on the routing side of things. One thing they also nail is the streaming and suspense side of things. I'm not sure about how you guys used React before, but there was something called React Suspense in React, where if you want something else to show when your application is loading some data, you can show some loading dash that dot or whatever using React Suspense. So you have like a very strong user experience. Well, Next.js, what it does is take that into the account and does everything behind the scenes. So that means in plain React, you used to write those code by yourself and configure where you want to show the user the loading state. But in Next.js, they do that all for you behind the scene. And the cool part about this is all you have to do is create something called loading.jsx or loading.js, tsx, whatever you're using, and create a file called loading, and that's it. Suspense state. So every time you have like a heavy data coming in, your Next.js app automatically going to put this loading React Suspense into your app automatically for you, so you don't have to configure when to use the loading state, when to use React Suspense. The Next.js figures it out for you, so that's cool. The other part is not found.js, and it will automatically generate not found for you. If you run into a not found page, it will automatically show this for you. So a lot of this error boundary is happening behind the scene. You don't have to touch or configure anything. Next.js does this streaming and suspense for you. So all you have to do is write good full stack, good application, and you don't have to worry about the suspense and streaming part of things. So that's that. The last part I want to talk to you guys about. So this brings us to our next point, which is the last point, the SEO. Let's jump back into the code. Now, I'm not sure you have noticed this, but when you go to the layout, you see there is some metadata. Now, this is default for every pages. So every pages will have some kind of metadata, and you can go beyond that. So let me see if I can find. So the metadata is basically the SEO part of things. You can put in a title, you can put in a description, and you will have the metadata for that app. And you're going to find that on the client side as well. So when you go over here, when you go all the way on the top, go to the head, you will see some metadata that comes up. The title is here, so create next app. And you will probably have some description as well. I'm not sure if it's in here, but yep, all the metadata shows up in this space, and you will have the time. There's a description generated by create app. So this makes it more SEO friendly, but you can also explore more. So you have a lot of other stuff as well. You have keyword, refer, application. So you can go in more details to more into the metadata side of things. So it's more search worthy on the search engine. But this is by default. You can do title, description. You can also do dynamic metadata. So you have like a dynamic page, which we're gonna look into in the full stack application. You can create dynamic metadata as well. So that's it for the crash course. I hope you guys have a really good understanding of the very basic of Next.js. I really tried my best to make sure you understand all the nitty-gritty details of it. It's gonna make more sense once we start building app together using full stack application, like MongoDB connecting the database. We are writing something on the front end and it's affecting on the database. We are bringing in some server action, which I'm really excited about to show you guys. And yeah, without further ado, make sure before we jump in, you grab the free guide one more time. If not, if you already have done that, like this video, subscribe, and comment down below. And we will jump into building full stack application. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I hope you seen that crash course, and we're gonna get started coding into this application. But before I do that, I want to make sure we have like an overview of what we're trying to build. So this is the app, what it looks like. You have the front hero page, index page. All you have to do is sign up in here. This is a Google Auth using Next authentication. And then when you sign in, you have this page, which is very simple, similar page as the index page. And here you can see we have like a search bar in here. We can search different prompt from here. We can do Next.js and it shows up on Next.js. So really nice feature. And also we have something like the prompt in here. You can also upvote this prompt. You can downvote this prompt. It's working pretty dynamically. And you have your own prompt. So your own prompt will have something called delete. So you can like delete this prompt if you want. You click on it, it will go away. And yep. And also you can go to the profile. You can see what prompt you have, what prompt you created. So we can also do create prompt. This is where the interesting thing happened. As I mentioned many times, we're going to be using server action, the new data fetching rule or data injecting rule that Next.js have. Is really straightforward, does everything for us. We can like just type whatever in a new prompt, hashtag AI prompt, and we click enter. Once we click enter, it will automatically inject to our data, and we can see we have the data right here. Upload that, we can download that, we can also delete that, and yep, that's how we do it. So it's a full stack application automatically injecting our data to MongoDB. We're using NextAuth for the authentication, logout. We're using some use state to do the search bar, and we also yeah, fetching the backend data or posting something on the backend data to update this upvotes, downvotes, and populate it using the popular one on the top. So a lot of cool stuff happening, and you can just go here, log out, automatically log out for us using the NextAuth with the Google Authentication API keys. So that's the overview of the app. A very full stack application. You can also go crazy with it. You can also add your own features to it. But without further ado, let's jump right into the coding and start building this from scratch. So I'm back to my folder on VS Code. The first thing I do is npx create next app, add latest. To tell us the project name, we're gonna call it from T5. No, no. We're gonna use Tailwind, so yes. And no on the SFC app router. We're going to be using app router, so yes. And no, the last part. I'm going to be cding into the project. So from T5 and then code in here. So I'll run the project npm run dev here. Cool. So we have a blank project open, which is great. We have everything set up. Make sure you copy. I have a GitHub link down below. Make sure you copy the asset, the public, inside the public folder. We have an asset folder. You copy that into your project. And you also copy the style, which is the global CSS styling I added in here for the project. So once we have that pasted in, it's going to look something like this. And then we have a main styling like a heading, a description, some button. We are using Tailwind, by the way. If you haven't used Tailwind before, you can check out my previous Tailwind course video. I go over a lot of cool Tailwind stuff, but right now we're just going to be using Tailwind. This is being automatically installed for us. You can see in here, they already did a global CSS add import Tailwind, and they're using Tailwind on the NextJS side of things. But we're not going to be using this global, so you can like just delete that. And in our layout, we're going to be using the global from our style folder. Is here /global. Change that up. For the font, we are going to be using a different font. So let's open that up as well. We're going to be using called Open Sans. It's also coming from the Google Fonts. So NextJS also have Google Font integrated. So you can like use some of the Google font. I think they have like a specification on that, but you can like go ahead and check what Google fonts are there available. So we have like a lot of different Google fonts that you can use for NextJS. We are currently using Open Sans, which is this. So yep. So we have the Open Sans being in. Let's change that to Open Sans in here. Open Sans in the inter. And then, yep, we have the Open Sans come in and change that to Open Sans. So we have the Open Sans loaded up. Hopefully you're using it in here as well. Let me check up with my extension. We're using Open Sans, which is cool. All right, so we have something out of the way. Let's change the SEO while we are in here. Title is from T5 app. Description would be find the most popular prompt for AI use. And we have pretty much laid down in here. And next thing we are going to be doing is create some component, simple component that we can use. The first one obviously going to be a Navbar. So let's create a component folder outside of the app. I'll create in here called Navbar CSX, RAFCE, and we have the Navbar come in. Let's bring the Navbar to our layouts in here. Inside here. There we go. We have a Navbar. So Navbar come in. let's delete everything on the page. It's kind of like bothering a little bit, right? So let's delete everything in here. We don't need anything. So we have the navbar there. Let's get started on the navbar a little bit. We're going to be doing a lot of things in the navbar, like when we have the user, so how the user sign in and things like that. But for now, we're gonna do like a basic structure styling in here, so we get something going on the navbar. So class name, we're gonna do some flex box in here with a width of full, padding top of 4, margin bottom of 12. Flex will be column, so we're gonna do everything in column in here on the mobile side of things. So for those of you who don't know, Flexbox is a mobile first design. So everything you type in is happening on the mobile and the bigger viewport unless you specify it. So item will be center. Now we're gonna specify on the bigger viewport, we want flex to be row. So we want a nice row of navbar, and then on the mobile we want everything to be in column. Also, we want to justify between when it comes to also padding of X of 12 when it comes to the bigger screen. Here we're gonna bring in some link, let's say, from the NextJS. So I'll make sure we have that coming in. Okay, so we have the link. In here we're gonna href of, let's say, our home page. And inside that we want to have like an image, which is going to be our logo. So we also want to bring in image from the NextJS image as well. For image, you need a couple of things. The source, which is going to be on the assets, and logo, the PNG, and image mandatory need a width. We're going to provide a width of, let's say, 100 and a height of 100 pixel as well. Let's go back to our app. So we have Spotify logo coming in there. Next, we want to do a couple of different things for the navbar, and let's start building that as well. So right after the link, we're gonna have a div of class name flex, items center, space of, let's say bigger space of X. And in here, we're gonna bring in the link again. And in this link, we're gonna have something called create prompt. This is where we're gonna do the create prompting. And it's gonna have a class name of button. So blue btn, which is a global style, which you copied on the style coming from there. And let's say create prompt. So we have a nice button on here. Doesn't do anything because we haven't created a page yet. So there's that. And next we're gonna do is some popover. We're gonna use something called headless UI. So we're gonna install that. So we're gonna use headless UI, pretty fast and easy UI that you can recreate in React. So it's made by Tailwind, of course. So very responsive. And we're gonna use something called popover. So when you pop over, we're going to be seeing like, profile and logout on our application. So we're gonna install that on our app. I'm gonna create a new terminal and install that. So we have that installed. Next thing we're gonna do is bring in to our navbar. So we're gonna bring in import popover from add headless UI, and we're going to use some popover things in here. So after the link, we can type in popover and comment that out, so we know this is like a popover happening in here. The popover will be happening in here, and let's bring in some popover code. So this is from the example here, but we're gonna modify a little bit. So in the popover button, you're going to be putting in an image. So image For now, we can put our logo, right? We can just use the same image for now. Once we have the Google authentication in here, we're going to replace it with our profile image from the user we're getting. So it says on the client only, for sure. We're using some importing. The client only works in the client side. So component import client side, we're going to do is we're going to turn this into use client. It's not server side anymore. And we have the logo in here. And what we are going to be doing is when you click on the button, we're going to be opening up this panel. Let's say right now, when you click on it, it's look really weird. The logo is too large, so it's not good looking in here. But we're going to change things up a little bit. So delete all that. We're going to do is link. First thing we're going to do is href on our profile. So you go to profile. If you want to go to profile, you can see what kind of prompt you did before. Let's call profile in here. And then we're going to do is button, and we have a logout button we're going to use to log out our user. But that's pretty much it. We don't need that. So we have this profile logout. We also need to style these up a little bit to make sure we have this coming in the right places. So we do have pop over nav styling. So we have like a background thing going on in here, which is coming from the global as well. And here we are not be using grid. We're gonna use like box column, padding y of 2, padding x of 3, and we're gonna do a space of y. Let's say space of y, and let's do a 2 spacing in there. So it's kind of looking nice, better than before. So that is pretty much it. We have this down. The next I want to do is tackle the big guys. We're gonna tackle the logging in here for now. I think that will, if we take care of the logging, we should be doing a little bigger task out of the way. So let's do that. So to first start adding the next authentication in here on the application, we need to install a package called npm install NextAuth. This is a really popular NextJS authentication library that you can use. It's right here, and really easy to do certain things in NextJS, and makes it very easy to start working with Google authentication as well. So let's jump into the configuration a little bit so I can show you how to configure it. So route handler at app, which is the app router we're using. So here we have to do this. Some of the steps are kind of like a mandatory because it's kind of like a configuration thing. So we will start doing it right now. First thing first, we are going to be creating in the app. We can create a API folder. So this is where all the backend API is going to live. Inside that, we're going to create a file called auth, A-U-T-H. Inside that, we need to create another file, square bracket, dot, so it's 3 dot, and then next auth, close the square bracket. And inside that, we're going to create a folder called route.js. Now, I did not make that up. All this folder name is actually on the documentation. You can see it's exactly like this. So we're going to follow the convention and go on with this. So first thing first, we're going to bring in something called NextAuth in here. So this is our authentication that we just installed. We are going to bring Google provider from NextAuth / providers / Google. Next part is we're going to create a configuration. Now this is all some code that is basically some handshake between the NextAuth and the Google provider. So we are connected between these two, so we can involve people to sign in using Google providers. So we're going to create something called auth handler. we're gonna do NextAuth, bring in the NextAuth. And here we're gonna do is provider. We're gonna open up our provider and Google provider. So see one thing in here that this is an array. That means you can have multiple provider. You can use GitHub provider. You can use all other kind of Facebook authentication as well. Like you can do any kind of provider, but I think Google is very trusted and very easy to use to get the API and everything. So we're gonna do that in here. We're gonna have a client ID in here, which we're gonna bring in pretty shortly. We're gonna have client secret in here as well. And we're gonna have some callback function in here because we need people to sign in. And the other important callback function is we need a session. So we need people's, like people who's signed in and who's not. So we can do these callbacks in here. So we're gonna have an async function called sign in. And here we're gonna pass in a profile. And we're going to do is a try catch function in here. So that's out of the way. Just console log that error as well. So we have the sign in. The next we want is something called session. So async session. This is mainly for being kind of like a session cookies. If you build a full stack application before, like we want to make sure we have cookies on some of these signed in users, so we know who's signed in and who's not. So this is basically it. So we have that in place. The next we need to do, we're going to come back once we have the database down. We are going to be filling this up. We don't have any user database in here, so we're not gonna collect this, but we want to export it right now. So export auth handler as get and export auth handler as post. So we have that configured, which is good. We need to come back to our authenticate in Navbar to kind of like do some provider authentication configuration as well. Now this whole auth configuration is a little bit too much. Like we were writing a lot of code that we might not understand at first, so it can get a little confusing, but I want to make sure you guys understand fully. So once we have other configurations set up, I'm going to do a recap on what we did, so we have like a strong understanding of what we are doing in this configuration section. So next we are going to be doing is we're going to create a component in here called provider. So we do have here, this takes in two things. So children, kind of like a layout, and then we have session, which is the cookies. Of course, we're gonna pass it through, so we know. So this is happening at the top level. So remember, we want to know who's logged in and not at the very top level. So session provider is basically doing that at the very top level. They're making sure we know what is going on. So we bring in session provider from NextAuth/React. And we're going to be using this for the div. So we have that session provider built in. We're going to pass in the children. And for the session, it's going to take in the session as well from the provider. So we have that provider set up. It's basically what it's doing is kind of creating a provider for the top level component. So it's taking a children, as injecting in here, and it's taking in the session provider, wrapping it into the component itself. So we have a session that is also passing it from the provider session. I hope you guys get the idea. And we're gonna wrap this into our main layout. So we go back to the layout, and then we bring in the provider in here. So we have the provider, and that's it. Oh, we have to wrap it in everything. So have provider children, There we go. So provide at the top level, and everything inside for the layout goes inside the provider. So everything in here is basically the children for the provider that has been acted in here. So that's one more configuration out of the way. The next configuration is bringing in this, making sure we have the client secret working. We're going to be applying that in the Navbar, and then we are for the login and sign in and sign out, and then we're going to be creating some database and making sure we are storing the user into a database when users sign in. So let's do that. So back to our console cloud for Google, which is console.cloud.google.com. Once you log in here, you can create a project. I'm going to create a new project and call it from T5-2. I already have one name in the same, so I'm going to call this 2. Creating the project, which is good. I'll go to the project. I'm now there. Next I'll do is go to API and services, Auth consent screen, create. App name will be prompt T5. Support email is my email. Then we're gonna do is, so once we have that, we're gonna go in, put in my email, and then save and continue. And here, save and continue as well. Save and continue, and then we're gonna do is credential. And here we're gonna create a credential or client ID. This is, we're gonna use a web app from T5 web. This is gonna be localhost 3000, and the same thing as well. HTTP colon / localhost 3000, and then create on both sides. Now this is where we are going to be putting into our env file. So go back, copy that. We're going to create an env file on the top level in here. .env, and then we're going to type in Google client ID, and then copy the client secret in here as well. So we do Google client secret is equal to that number. So we have those two ready. Make sure we are not putting that on the git ignore as well, just in case. So that's been taken care of. We are going to be going back to our route configuration and put them in here. So process.env, client ID, process, client secret. By the way, I'm using a plugin called, if you guys want that, it's pretty cool, which is Tab 9 AI autocomplete. So it's basically autocomplete some of my stuff because it knows what we're trying to bring in here. So that's kind of helpful. So we have that. That means we provided our Google client ID. We provided our client secrets. Now Google provider and our auth, NextAuth, should be shaking hand and making sure they're working together. So in that case, we are pretty much done. All we need to do is go to, let's double check on here with our console log, making sure we are getting this data back just in case. Go back to our app, and here, the provider, we need to turn that into a client component. So let's go ahead and do that in here. We're using some hook in here from the NextAuth. Looks like we're getting the client back, which is good. That means we should be also attaching this part into our Google Auth. So that's out of the way. Let's go back to our Navbar and kind of handling. So we're going to bring a couple of things in here from the React Auth. So we're going to be doing sign in, sign out, use session, and get providers. This is the last part of the NextAuth configuration, by the way. So after this, I'm going to give you a little bit of overview, so it makes a lot more sense. First thing on the navbar, we're going to check if the user is signed in. So use session, and yeah, we're using client, which is good. So next, we're going to create a use state. This is also in the next configuration documentation. So if you guys need some guidance, feel free to go here and read about how to do some configuration. That will give us a little bit more context on this. So there's that. We have this use state. We're going to do null in here. And this is a provider. Providers. Set providers. So we have the provider coming in, and then we're going to also use effect in here. We're going to load this one time, and let's bring that in here. Use state. Then we have use effect as well. Use effect. Good. And we're going to do a couple of things. Let's create something called setup providers equal to async await function. This is basically setting up the provider when we log in, when we see the page. So navbar, and we're going to do this response in here and await get providers. This is coming from right here, no, NextAuth React, and then we are setting the provider right after this. Is we're using the use state, and then we are passing in the provider response in here. So this is where confusion might happen. I totally understand. And we want to also recall this. I'm going to explain this right now. So what is happening here? Like, this is like, it's going crazy. Like, we are using providers everywhere. So first thing before I dive into this, remember we did like provider, and we have like a provider component that basically brings a session provider from React NextAuth, kind of like wrap this in. And in the route, we have this going on. So this is the brain of everything is going on. This is NextAuth is basically where the connection is happening with the Google provider. So we provided them some client ID, client secret, and they're bringing in some Google provider, and they're connecting NextAuth with Google provider in here, which is like a handshake connection in here. That's done, and that is being provided also in the session provider. So this is where we're getting the session from this, between these two, and we're providing is in here using this. So we have like a session injected in our provider. And on top of that, we are handling something on Navbar, which is here. So once we have these two set up, the Google Auth and the provider, we're going to have all the information in our NextAuth. So our NextAuth will be able to grab different information from these two configuration, and will be able to provide us with some details. So when our user sign in, we will have those details in this provider. So get provider, when we're getting the provider, we're getting the Google provider and putting it in here. That means we're getting the Google provider back. So all we have to do is like map through this. So if we have, let's say we have one more provider like GitHub provider, we will also get it back in this provider, in this get provider. So we're going to have Google provider. If we have GitHub provider, we will have that in here as well. And then we're basically getting that provider and we are putting it into our use state in here. So this will now have Google provider in here, which is this right here. So a lot of explanation. Next, we are going to be doing here is some configuration here as well. So we're going to be going through the providers. And if the provider exists, if it's not null, you're going to handle the object values of the provider, which is coming in from the provide configuration. And which is, for now, we only have Google provider. So this is going to be a Google provider. And we're going to create a button and sign in. So for every provider, we're going to have a button with a class name as BlueBTN. And the key would be provider.name, which is preferably going to be Google. And on click, we are going to be signing in the user. So on click is going to be sign in. Sign in that we just imported from the, and we're going to do is provider.id for the sign in, which is also coming from the provider from this itself as well. And the sign in is coming from right here. So NextAuth. I'm not sure if this work, but let's check that out in our local host. So we have a sign in. And we have a sign in with Google. It's gonna throw an error because we need a couple of different configuration in here. So it looks like we are getting some Google authentication in here, which is great. We need to handle some things in here as well. So we want to make sure if the user is logged in, we are showing them this. If user is not logged in, we are showing them that. Okay, so that's how it's going to go. So we want to make sure if right here we create a new session. So we have the session coming from here. This is basically taking in the cookies from the auth and checking if any user is logged in. If user is logged in, then we should have a user. If they're logged in, we're going to show them something. And if they're logged out, we're going to show them something else. So if they're logged in, we're going to show them the popover. If they're logged out, we're going to show them the button, sign in button. Get fragments in here. And we'll paste that in here. So let's go back to our, so we have this. Create prompt is also going to be inside the session user. So this one as well. So we're going to create this whole thing in there. So we have this to recap. So the whole thing, I moved it into the session user. So if the user is logged in, we are showing them all of this, which is create a prompt, you have a profile, you have a logout. If the user is not logged in, we are showing them this provider sign in, which is going to be the Google provider. This is not working. We need to configure this a little bit more further, but it's actually working behind the scene. So we made a lot of configuration happen. Time to build the actual app. So let's work on solving this login problem first. Okay, so now we have the provider set up. We need to do this. We need to create some function in here. We need to finish this sign in function. We need to finish this session function. So we know what to do when we click the sign in. So when that happens. So what we need to do is create our database and connect our database. Now this is going to be another configuration process to get it out of the way. So I'm logging into my MongoDB. The next thing I do, I create a new project called from T5 to build a database. I'm going to pick the free. So next thing we're going to do is copy this into our env. For now, I'm going to copy it just here. The password just here. And create user. Local environment, IP address should be 0.0.0.0. Add entry. So we have our ID IP address here. That means you can access anywhere. Finish and close. Go to the database. Connect. We're gonna do drivers. Paste that, and we're gonna call something called MongoDB URI, and we're gonna paste that in. We're gonna paste the username in here. Password should be in the password side. So we are good. So MongoDB URI is okay. So now we need to do is create a util function that basically connect to our MongoDB. So we're gonna create a folder called utils. Create a function called database. Connect our database. And we're gonna install a couple more packages in here. So we're gonna install npm install MongoDB, mongoose decrypt, and that's it. So once we have that installed, we are going to be connecting our MongoDB database that we created in here with our application. So we're going to import mongoose, and we're going to create something called by itself. It's going to be connected to false, and we're going to export const connect to DB with async function, of course. And yep, we have that going on. And inside that, we're going to bring in the mongoose dot set quick query equal to true, and if is connected, if we have is connected to true, that means we are already connected. Console log should be connected to MongoDB already. I'm going to return it. We'll close out the function. After that, we're going to do the try catch handling in here. Console log error in here. And in the try catch, we're going to do is await mongoose.connect process.env.mongodb URI. And we're going to do a little bit of configuration as well. We're going to do db name should be promptify, and then we're going to do a little bit more configuration here as well. We're going to do use new URL parser true, and we're going to use unified topology is equal to true, and there we go. So we need to make sure we're doing it right way. Okay, so here we have this in place. I think there's some error that I'm seeing on my end. Maybe this here it should be. So yep, this is basically connecting our MongoDB with our MongoDB URI, which is coming from the env that we have. So making sure there's a connection between these two, and we're exporting that because NextJS is serverless. So that means once you connect to a database and the servers stop, the server will get deleted. So you have to connect the database again at some point. So that way it's the serverless efficiency. So you have to export this and we connect this wherever we need. So that's out of the way. We're going to go back to our, we're going to create a database for users. So when the user logged in, we have the database for our user as well. So I'm going to create something called models in here. And inside there, we're going to create a user.js folder. Here, we're going to bring in some schema, model, and models from mongoose. And we're going to use something called users, create something called user schema, new schema, and there we have it. So we're gonna do a couple of things. Of course, we're gonna do some email. Type would be string. It needs to be unique, otherwise we're gonna have crazy user handling. So this email already exists if it's not, and then you need to be have it required, and we're gonna have that to please enter valid email. That's it. And then we're gonna do username. For that, type is string. Required is also to username. That's right. The AI is working for me. That's great. And we're gonna have an image. This is gonna be the user image. The reason why upvote is an array or not any number or anything, because we want to make sure we want to track what user upvote what prompt, so we can have different UI experience. So if a user upvote, we want to make sure they have a different upvote icon than the downvote icon. So that's why we are putting it as an array. And we're going to do is user is models dot user. If not, we're going to just create it by ourselves with the user schema. That's it. That's the configuration for the user. And yep, we have the user up and coming and it's ready to go. So now we do is go back to our auth provider and kind of start filling in this sign-in profile, how we sign in. So first thing we do is await connect to DB, of course, because this is a serverless. If it runs one time, if it stops done running, it will die. So we want to make sure we connect the DB every time we run the sign in. So we have that. And then we're going to do is const user exists. Is equal to, we want to make sure that user exists in our database. If it's, we're going to find the user. Email by email, profile dot email. If the user doesn't exist, if let's say user exists, it doesn't exist, you're going to be creating the user. So create using the data, the email profile. Now this is coming from the Google profile. So if a user sign in using Google, we are basically using the Google profile to find this data. So username profile dot username is profile dot name from Google. We're going to replace a little bit. We're going to make sure we are getting rid of the spaces to lowercase as well. So we're and profile dot image, which is nice. So we are storing this data into our database, and then after all that, we're going to return true. So get the function out of here, and then we have return false to close out that function. So that's that. That's for the sign in. Now we're going to do is session. So we making sure we want to have the user right user stored in. So session user would be await user dot find one. Email should be session dot user dot email. So you're finding the user by email using the session. So this is the user that is logged in. So session dot user ID, we want to make sure we have the same logged in user, or that user exists in our database to string. So what this doing is we're going to current user logged in should have the same ID as the user that is logged in. So this will create a MongoDB ID, which is this ID. So we are making sure they have the same ID and it's the single user, the right user that is logged in. So if not, we're going to console log, and that's it. So let's jump into one more thing. We're going to handle the callback in our credentials. So I'm going to go back to this app and authorize redirect. We're going to be doing is I'm going to go back in here just to show you guys some initialization configuration provider or credential. And we have to do this. So we need to make sure we have the callback set to our user. So this time we're gonna have Google. So we're gonna basically using this. So I'll do that and then I'll paste that in here. So localhost 3000 API auth callback Google. So we want to make sure we have that redirect callback implemented in here. So the Google provider is able to connect with the NextAuth the proper way when we're using the callback function, like sign in or session. So let's go back to our app and see if it works. So sign in. We're signing oliver@gmail.com. And we are in. Wow. That is a big step. Just pat yourself on the back for doing that. Let's double check the database if we actually did it. So user, we have my email in here, my username, and we have upvote. So that's it. We have that set up, which is good. We don't need the image, by the way. I think the image, yeah, we don't need that. We can just keep it in here, but you can get the idea. So next we are going to be doing is the image is already in the Google provider. So we are going to be updating the navbar a little bit to make it a little bit more dynamic on the image side of things if the user is logged in. So let's go back to the navbar and update that part. So right here, when we go to the image, we are going to be grabbing it from the session. So whatever session is in here, we're going to do is user.image. So we sign in, and it says user signed in. We should have a different navbar. We probably had the logic on the wrong way. So if the user is session.user is signed in, let's console log in here, see if we see anything. Well, we have to restart the server because we need to make sure the environment variable is working properly. We also need to set some NextAuth environment variable here. So NextAuth URL is going to be our HTTP local host 3000 NextAuth underscore URL underscore internal is equal to HTTP 3000 as well. And we also need a next auth secret. Next secret is going to be, we have to generate it using the documentation. So this is where it states how to use the next auth your environment variable, set it up. So we need to run this to get like a next secret number. So we can like provide it to NextJS. So copy that and put it in the next secret URL, next secret, and then run the server. So look like the secret NextAuth is not working properly. We need to do one last thing. It's some configuration on our side of thing. It's some webpack configuration for next secret. So I found this on the Stack Overflow. You can do this some experimental feature for the config. We are also going to be copying over a couple more things, which is the domain. This is like the Google domain. So if this is a Google image domain, if you don't have that, your Google image will not work. Server component is designed to Mongoose. And server action is like the action we're going to use later on. So I pasted in here a little bit earlier. But these are the configuration that we need to update. And I'm going to run the server again. So from the console log, look like we're not getting the session. And I think on the session, on the route, on the main, we got the session, but we didn't return it. So that's why we're not getting the session. So once we have returned the session after we verify the ID, we should be getting some session in here. So let's go back, sign in one more time. So look like we got the profile image and we have the session. So it's good. Yeah, the Google image is loading as expected. So let's go back to my navbar and update that part a little bit. So navbar and Google image from my profile is in here somewhere. So width is 37, height 37, and we're gonna have a class name of rounded is Tailwind, rounded full, and alt will be profile picture, profile picture. I'm gonna get rid of that console log. So we have that going on, which is nice. Let's try logging in with Android. We don't have the logout function added in, so let's do that too. So we are able to log out the user as well, which is pretty straightforward. We just click on the button and then we do on click is equal to sign out, which is coming from right here. So then log out, user logged out. Let's sign in with a different user. I have my user profile in there, which is nice, it's working. We also can check on the network and we have session and we have our cookie as well. So that's great. We are working in there and we should be good. Next thing I want to do is do the create prompt. Now this is the fun part, but before I do that, I want to put some text in here on the home page. Adding some things in here, and after this we didn't have anything, so let's do h1 in here. I'll find the most popular, then we're gonna do a break, and then we're gonna do a span in here, AI prompt, and in here we do a class name of text blue of 600. And we also need some classes for h1 as well. Heading, text center, and paragraph. We're gonna have class name of description. Here we're gonna write Pumptify is a productivity tool, best in one place, and that. So that's out of the way, and then we're going to do some handling as well. So let's bring in some use session in here. If you use that, we're gonna have to turn that into use client, and bring in a new session from use session from NextAuth React. So we have the use session, and we're going to define it here. Data is session. We go to use session, and we're going to make sure if the user is logged in, user.id exists, then we're going to show them a home prompt component, which we're going to build a little bit shortly. If the user is not, then we're going to show them something else. And then here we're going to be doing a paragraph span sign in. And then here we're going to do to explore best and most quoted AI prompt. And after that, we're going to do an image from next. And here we have two images already there. So source, we go to assets, main image.png. Width is going to be 800 and height is going to be 800 as well. Alt will be main image. And we also need some classes in here, of course. So margin top of 6, margin x is equal to auto, these are margin left and right. And then we're gonna have a class name in here. We're gonna text center, margin y of 6. And we'll have span, we're gonna do like an underline, which is all Tailwind, by the way. So home prompt is not defined, so it's gonna throw some error. So home prompt CSX and REFC, create a home prompt in there. And here we're just going to import that home prompt. That's it. So we should be in good hand now. So we have something in here. Does look like a huge margin top. So if so let's see, we might be doing something wrong in here. Margin top 6. I don't know why there's a huge margin in here. Oh, this should be in here. Yeah. So we have this h1 in the main, and then we have like a decision here. If the session user is logged in, we're gonna show them this. If the user is logged out, we're gonna show them the image, which is this. So user is logged out right now, so we are showing them that. And then if the user is logged in, we should have a different. We're gonna show them the home prompt in there, which is cool. I want to make sure we have the right right thing in here. We have the right spelling. Yeah, this is the old one that came with NextJS. We don't want that. We want flex column and minimum age screen, minimum height. So we have something going on. Good. So home prompt, we need to do it later, but first let's do some create prompt, how we create prompt, and then we can come back to home prompt and display all the created prompt in there. So create prompt, we need to create a route called create prompt in the app folder. So outside of the API, so we create a folder called create prompt, and inside that we're gonna create a page.tsx. CSX, we're not using TypeScript, so CSX. So we're gonna do here is RAFCE. I'm gonna name it create prompt. This is where things get really interesting, the server action. So in here, we will be doing server action. And just to recap a little bit to have it on your radar, this is server action. Server action are an alpha feature in NextJS built on top of React action. They enable server-side data mutation, reduce client-side JavaScript, and progressively enhance form. Now we'll be using form here, so server action is the perfect thing to use here. So let's create a form, and I'll show you guys why it's pretty cool. So yeah, let's do the form. So on the component itself, we are going to be having a div, the class of text center, mx auto, w6 by 12. That's the width. Then we have a h1 heading test. I'm coming from the global CSS. Create prompt. And then we're going to do form. And we have a class of margin top of 8. And in the form, we have a div with a label prompt. And label should have a span, enter, prompt. We are going to be doing a little bit of styling in here. So flex of column, items, start. And for the span, we're going to do font of light. And after those span, we're going to do text area of our class of text area prompt. It's a global style as well. And we're going to have some type is text. I don't need that. So after that, we're going to do name of prompt. ID is prompt. Placeholder is how to I make an HTTP request in React. Let's say, oh, in Next.js. We're doing Next.js. Come on. And this is going to be required. So this is like an example prompt, just to show the user. And we have a closing tag, self-closing tag in here. So after the div, we're gonna create another div, label, tags, and in here we're gonna do span as well. It's very similar stuff. Class name of flex column, items start, and here class name is font light. And here we're gonna have a text area as well. Self-closing tag. Class name is text area prompt. Margin y of 4. In here we're gonna have name is equal to tags. ID is equal to tags. Placeholder is equal to hashtag JavaScript. Hashtag web development. Hashtag tutorial. You know, hashtag it would be NextJS. And we're gonna have a required as well. So the client side get a required in here. And then after the div, we're gonna do a button. The button is basically gonna say enter. And class name is equal to blue btn. Now, putting things in context. If we never used something called server action, we would be grabbing this, put it in a state, so 2 different state, and then we're going to do some fetching with that state. So it's a little bit of work, but with next action, we don't need to do any of that. We don't need to handle the button. We just need to create a function that does it for us. So in that case, in order to do that, we need to do a couple of different things. We need to actually create an action, a function action that works outside of this. And that prompt action will only do the action for us. It will create a prompt for us by itself. So before we do that, we need to create a database for the prompt as well. We have the database set up for the user, but we don't have the database set up for prompt. So, you know, if you need to create a prompt, we need to have a database for it. So let's go ahead and do a prompt database on the model. So we create a new file called prompt.js. And in here, we're going to do same thing we did before, schema, model, and models from Mongoose. And then we're going to do is prompt schema is equal to new schema. We're going to have a prompt called type of string. We don't have it required, of course. So true, and we're gonna say prompt is required. And then we're gonna do is tags, type of string, required. Tag is required on this one for sure. So tag is required. And then we're gonna do is upvotes. For the user, we don't need an upvote. I don't know why they put the upvote on the user. Oh. Oh. And then we need an upvote. So we want to make sure who in this prompt upvoted, which user upvoted this prompt. Okay. And then creator of the prompt. So who created the prompt? This is going to be the user ID from the user. So that's it. We're going to export this with the models prompt. If not, we're going to add it to the model with the prompt text name and with the prompt schema. Export default prompt. Now we want to create an action on the util. So we create the action pretty easily. So action is called action file. And in here, we bring in the prompt, import prompt from the database. We also need to connect to DB from the database file, and we export an action called submit prompt async, and we don't have data for this. And we're gonna do some try catch block. Error. So await connect to DB. And first connect to MongoDB, and then bring in a new prompt. New prompt would be the data. This data is going to be the tag and the prompt, both of them. So it will be all inside. And then we're going to do is new prompt.save. So that's it. That's our action. Our action just connect to the DB, create a new prompt from the database. Do we have this right? So I want to change that. We have an error. It's a new prompt. We're exporting the right prompt. And in action, we are bringing in the prompt. And then you're creating a new database on the prompt and saving it. That's the action. That's basically it. And in the form handling, all we do is we just create the prompt. So let's go back to the create prompt. And in here, we do is we bring in that create prompt. So let's create a function called create prompt. Go to async form data. So here we have all the form data. And here we're going to do, like we used to do use client, we're going to do use server. So that means we're using server action in here. And in here we're going to do session is equal to await get server session. Why we are doing this? Because in the server side, we cannot get the client cookies, client side sessions. So we need a different session called server side session. Now this is coming from get server session from NextAuth. Next. For the server session, we need to configure another thing. So we're gonna do that in a bit. Let me console log this just to make sure if you're seeing any session in here. Going to be triggered when we do action on the prompt. So action, when we have our action and put create prompt in there, this will be triggered when we click on the action, which is the button enter right here. So let's go back to our app, create prompt, ESD enter. We have a session. We're getting good session, but we are not getting the ID. We need the ID to kind of do the creator. Like we have email, which is good. We have the prompt from the data, but we need an ID because we need an ID to make sure we have the creator checked in. Because when we created the user data, we need to make sure that we have when the prompt data, which user created the prompt. We can use name, we can use email, but it's not convenient. The ID would make things a little bit more useful because we know exactly what ID that refers to because we're using that ID. So in order to do that, we have to create a configuration. One more time, I think we need to create a configuration for get server side session. And how we do that is you go to the API, we go to the auth, and in that auth, we create a file called dot auth nextauth dot js. You can do a ts as well, but this live inside the auth. So inside the auth, we have this. It should be in the auth. So in the auth, we have this file and also that file. But this file is mainly going to be used for configuring our what do you call it, the ID. So we have the ID in the server side. So how we do that, we basically do the same thing we did over here. So we can copy paste this, and we don't need a lot of things. We don't need a sign in, so we can delete the sign in portion of it. We don't need that, and we need yeah, that's basically it. So we do this is we export it, export default next auth, and we change the name to auth option. The auth option is going to be exported in here, next auth option. So this is for the server side. This file specifically triggering the server side things. So when we have the server side in here, it will, we want to make sure we put it in here. So import. So we do a name export. Auth options from dash API slash auth slash next auth. And we paste this in our server side API. So if we go back, hopefully we will to add the ID into our session. So we have that. And next we're going to do is we are going to try catch in here. And we're going to do is post is equal to await submit prompt. Submit prompt, we're bringing it from the action, which we created earlier. Prompt is equal to form data dot get. This is going to be prompt. And then we're going to have tags form data dot get tags. And then we're going to have an ID, which is creator session dot user dot ID. So we have a catcher in here. Catcher, let's console log here. TFG, and then let's go back to our data. So we have a couple of prompts, I think. Okay, so that's worked out great, but we are not getting the creator ID. So this is something going on in here. So for the configuration, I'm going to clean up this function a little bit. Option, okay. So we should be doing good over here. Let me double check one more time. Okay, there could be a typo, so I'm going to clean it up a little bit more. So I rearranged the things a little bit, and yeah, I rearranged the things a little bit. So hopefully this will work. Make sure you guys copy this code in here. So this is the configuration for the server side session. So we need to make sure we can get the ID in here, session ID in the user. So hopefully we're able to do that from here. Yeah, looks like we were able to get the ID using the get server side session. So make sure you work a copy paste this configuration. There's been some error. So I kind of like cleaned it up a little bit. This is coming from the API auth folder and configuring it to get server side. So we have that in place. Let's go back to our MongoDB and delete most of these. We were like troubleshooting and get a clean data so we can work with it. Okay, so let's go back to here, and then this is new prompt, hashtag prompt, and then enter. Server action taking place. The data is already been injected to our MongoDB, and we should be good, right? So let's go back, check. Data injected on the MongoDB. We have the creator 799B. Let's check with the 799B. Perfect. So we have the prompt in place, the tag, the upvote as well. So just to recap real quick, what happened here is the server action we use. We create a folder called action. Here we specify an action, which is basically connecting to the database, writing the things into the database and saving the database. And the action is being brought into the create prompt. And here all we did was like the farm action. We made that action to be a function, async function. And in the function, we specified the use server, which is basically telling that this is the server action. And in here, we are getting the session because in the server side, we need to grab the cookies on the server side in a different ways. So we created a configuration for that and getting the session, and we're passing in the user ID, whoever that is logged in, and then passing in prompt and tag, which is getting from the form data. So the action is basically taking all the form data and they're specifying the ID and the name to find the prompt and the tag and put it in there. And we injected the data, creating our new data in the database. So that's it for the create prompt side of things. Once we enter, we also want to, once we enter, we want to redirect to our homepage. So we have like a nice user flow. So I will import redirect from next navigation. And in here, we're just gonna redirect right after we write this. So yeah, after we're done with this, we're gonna redirect to our homepage. There we go. Let's check that out. SD, enter, homepage. And in the homepage, we're gonna have all the prompts in here. So yeah, once we have that settled in, we're gonna come back to home prompt later. Let's do the profile first. So go back to our, and we create a folder called profile. And here we're gonna do page.csx, refc, profile page. So inside the profile page, we are going to be start creating our profiles in here. So we're gonna have all the prompts that the user created, and only the user prompt is being displayed in here. So we're gonna create something like that. So we need something like session from NextAuth router. We also want to have a client in here, and params. We're gonna make sure we pass in the params. So const data is session, and we have use session, and that's good. And we also need to fetch some data in here, so use effect. And we're gonna be fetching some data. Fetch prompt. Go to async. Response. Go to await. Fetch. And we're gonna do like a API slash user slash params.id. So it's gonna be a dynamic fetch page. So gotta make sure we use the string little in here, and we put in params.id. And let's create that API route as well. So in that API route, we're gonna create a folder called user, and in that user, we're gonna create a folder called ID square bracket, and inside that, we're gonna create route.js. So it's a dynamic. So ID, whatever the user ID is gonna hit that page. So we're gonna do prompt in here. Yeah, we're gonna bring in the prompt by still use import prompt from prompt, and we're gonna do connect to DB as well. So there's that, and then we're gonna do is export cons. So we need two type of there's like a lot of different type of call, like get request, post request. So we're gonna do a get request in here. We're gonna only get the user user prompt. So get request and async is we probably don't need request, but I'm gonna put it in there params, and we're gonna get all the fetch data using params in here. So try catch block. And in the try, await, connect to DB, and then const user prompt is equal to await prompt dot find creator params dot id. So we want to go to the prompt and we're gonna find the creator. If the ID matches the params dot id, which is the user profile page ID, then we're gonna grab those prompts only, and then we're gonna sort it by created at -1, so the latest creation on the top, and then we're going to return new response is JSON the stringify user prompt. Yep, and status of 200, and close that one out. If it fails, we're gonna do a similar response. We'll have a console log failed to fetch user prompts and 500. So that's it. That's looking good. So we are fetching the params.id. We also need to do something on the navbar when we are navigating to the params. So navigation to the params in here. When we go to the profile, right here, going to make it string interpolation. And we want to do is slash session dot user dot id. So we're going to the right user place, and once we have that in our route, we're gonna handle it. We're gonna do like a const data is equal to await response.json. Set. So we want to have a use state as well in here. So use state snippet, and we're gonna do is user prompt. So we have an empty array. And here, after that, we're going to do set user prompt is data. So once we have the data, we're going to fetch it. So if the user is logged in, then we're going to fetch it. Otherwise, we're not going to fetch it. So session, if user is logged in, which is the ID, we're gonna call that function. And we are also going to make sure session user logged in, then we're going to call that function as well. And in here, we're going to start showing all those cards. So we are going to be creating a card component shortly. So let's do some classes in here. So flex column, and here h1. And here classes is heading text center, a margin y of 4, and here it says my prompt. And then we're gonna do is a div with a class of mx_auto, and then we're gonna do is the user prompt. What we did over here, user prompt dot length is less than 1, then we will create a h3. Your prompt is empty. Click on the create prompt to create one. If it's if they have the prompt, then we're going to start. If they have more than one, we're going to start mapping it. Single user prompt, and then we're going to do a prompt card in here. So prompt card we haven't created yet, so let's create a component called prompt card.tsx, and we have a component like that. So we need to import it. Cool. Now prompt card will do a couple of things. It's going to take in all the data, single user prompt, so all the data from here. So right now, let's see what happened. We have one prompt. This user created one prompt, so we should have something like that. Okay, so this looks like, oh, we need to create a dynamic route. So ID, and inside that we need the page. Okay, it should work now. Use state is not defined from React as well. So right now the prompt is empty. We haven't created any prompt. Let's go create a prompt. The profile looks like it's not loading properly. So let's see why is that. So it's hitting this. So length is definitely see we're fetching the data properly. Send the client. So let's check the client. So get request is not working properly. So we're making user, then the request to this. So API user ID out.js. So it looks like we have a problem. I don't know. I also faced this problem before. For some reason, this @ sign doesn't work and it causes everything to fail. So I have to manually do some of this. So let's do page by page. For you guys, it might work. Like for me, it breaks for some reason that they have that's trying to solve. So there's that. And then we have the home prompt, which is in the app page coming from here. So a couple more pages. It's breaking as well. Layout. Okay, so right now I'm seeing that we are not able to visualize the or grab the prompts. So look like is I have to change some of these to get rid of some of the error instead of the ad. The ad was giving me some error. So I changed to these to clean things up a little bit. If you guys don't have that error, which is good. But I also found one thing: the user is in the wrong folder, which should be in the API folder. Just to give you an example of how the project should look like, on the API folder, you should have user ID and auth should have this in there. So yep, that's it. It should be they should be two separate files. And now it's going to work. And let me open up the profile page in here. So we have that going on. And reset the server as well. So refresh it. And then I sign in to my user. And then go to the profile. So we have 3 prompt card. That means 3 prompt that this user created. So now we have to do is create the prompt card to take in these prompts and display some nice prompt. So I'll go back to the prompt card, and here we're gonna do a lot of stuff. So we're gonna do import use session from NextAuth / React import. We're gonna do some icon import, so we're gonna install that shortly, and then we're gonna take in some prompt tags underscore ID upvotes creator, and we're gonna handle that. And first thing first is to get the data going. Okay, right now we have to install Font Awesome. So I'm going to go to the Font Awesome and grab some installation. So first thing we're gonna do is npm install Font Awesome SVG core. Then we're going to do 2 more stuff: SVG free solid SVG icon, free regular SVG icon, and also the React Font Awesome. So this is Font Awesome, React Font Awesome at the latest, and then we ran this 2. And then we ran this one. So a lot of Font Awesome stuff. The package edition should have all of them. These are the Font Awesome. And yep, let's start grabbing the Font Awesome on a prompt card and start. So we're gonna do a Font Awesome icon from at Font Awesome React. And then we also need the caret top upvote icon, which is FA caret up. This is this. And let's start making this component. So class name should be from card flex justify between base x is equal to be 8. And then we have give h2 of class names font font semi bold should be the prompt that is coming from here. And then I'm gonna do a paragraph class name is equal to font light, text is equal to small, and then we're gonna have tags. That's looking good. And we're gonna have a new thing, which is like a session. I'm gonna get into the session one more time. So if the user is logged in is equal to creator. So if the creator of the prompt is logged in, then he should be able to delete this. That means we're gonna have a button for deleting, delete, and we're gonna have a class name of delete btn. If there's gonna be another button for the upvote, and this is the button for that. So this is have a class of flex of column items sender, and then we'll have some upvotes. So upvote is coming from the props here. What we're gonna do is upvote dot includes session dot user dot id. If it's the logged in user is there, then we're gonna show. If the logged in user is in the array of the upvote, then we're going to show them a icon that look like an upvoted icon. Icon is equal to the carrot up. Size is 2XL. Class name is upvoted. And pretty similar things in here as well. If the user is not equal to the logged in user is inside the array of the upvote, then we're gonna say is not upvoted class. So let's see if we have anything like this. Yeah, this is a problem that I get error on that. So if you guys don't have it, which is good, if you guys get that error, you have to change some things up a little bit. So change this up a little bit. So how we do that is we with the models dot back dot back dot back and dot back. This one is the same as well. Dot back and another one, I believe. So I think we have it right. So let's check. Yeah. So upvote, it should handle the upvote. Right now it's not doing anything at all, which is fine. We're gonna implement that as well. So go back to the prompt card and we see over here on the prompt card that we got everything in here. We also need to do upvote.length. So we're seeing how many people liked it. 0 people liked it. So I think that's been handled pretty good. We need to handle the upvote and handle the delete function in here. So let's do handle upvote, handle upvote equal to try catch block again. And the try const response equal to wait that's API slash prompt slash underscore ID. Method is going to be patch. We're updating it. And body is going to be based on the stringify user ID, which is session user.id. So we're gonna pass in the ID, making sure it's the right user that's been logged in. And after that, we should have that. Oh, we need to also do one thing a little bit later, but I think this should be good for now. So, okay, so I'll wait, and then we have async function in here. So wait, and then we need to have async in here. So async function, and to so there is that, and we need to implement that when we click on the icon. So when we click on this button, on click, we go to handle upvote, and we also need to create this API route in the API. So we need to add a folder in there called prompt. And then we need to create another ID dynamic route here. And inside that, route.js. So we are going to the specific ID of the route. So here we passed in the ID of the prompt, which is the prompt ID. The creator is a creator ID. This is the prompt ID. So we're passing in the prompt ID. And we're going to the prompt ID to make some patch. So here we're going to do is import prompt from models/prompt, import connect to 2DB from utils/database, and export const patch is where we do the update. Request params const. We're gonna grab the user ID from here. This pasting on the response should be available on the response. Or response request should be available on the request. And then we're gonna do a try catch block. Connect to DB. And then from existing prompt, it should be await prompt dot find by ID params dot ID. So your param ID taking in and looking for that in the prompt. That is the database in here. So prompt database, you're finding if that ID matches with the prompt ID. If it does, then we do have then we're gonna handle that. So if the existing prompt dot upvote dot includes user ID, which is the user that is logged in. If he is in their upvote, he is not. So if it's not, then we need to do some change. We need to update one, and we need to push to the array. So that is the upvote, and we're gonna push the user ID. So if the user doesn't exist inside the upvote and he clicks on it, he need to be added to that upvote. So we can show a different like font awesome icon. If on the other hand, else, if he already in there, then we need to pull him from that. we need to take him out. It's similar to popping the user off from that. So we're gonna pull him out of that array. As you know, this is an array, so he should be able to. We're pushing him into the array. If you click it again, then we're pulling it out. That means he's downvoting it. And then we're going to do some response, new response prompt upvoted / downvoted. Status should be 200. Okay, and then if it doesn't, new response error updating prompt status is 500. That is good. Let's check it out. Okay, good, it's working. Upvote this one again. Refresh the page. Yeah, upvoted. This is cool. This is working great, but it's not dynamic. Like we click on it, it doesn't do anything. We refresh it, it does anything. We click on it again, it doesn't. It's doing something behind the scene, but it's not updating on the client side. So refresh it, it's gone. So we need to handle that. So how do we do that? Go to the profile. And then we do is create a state, like use state snippet, upvote state false by default. We're gonna pass this function down to our prompt card. So set prompt card is equal to step upvote state is upvote state, and prompt card is going to bring that in. So every time we do this upvote, we are going to do is previous is not equal to previous. So we're interchanging true, false in the parents here. And we also need to make sure we are updating the use state with this. So every time this changes, we want to refresh that. So that way it's dynamic, it's working. Right? Cool. So that's out of the way. We got a lot done. We have to do the delete now. So let's work with the route first. So let's create the delete. It's pretty straightforward. So on the after the patch, we're gonna do export const delete async request and then params and try catch block again. And here we're gonna do is connect to DB. After that, we're gonna do const selected prompt equal to await prompt find by ID params ID. So we are finding that prompt by the params.id. Await selected prompt dot delete one. So it's pretty straightforward. Find that prompt, delete that prompt, and then return very similar kind of thing. And here is a prompt deleted. If not, you're gonna show an error updating or deleting prompt. Cool. Let's go check it out. Delete. Oh, we haven't implemented on the prompt card yet. So let's go to the prompt card and handle the function. Cool. And then again try catch block. response is equal to await fetch slash API slash prompt slash underscore ID, and method would be delete. And then we also want to set up both state to true, false, whatever that is. It's going to do a refresh for us. So delete that. Oh, the click. I think that's one thing that's left. So here we want to have that on click to handle delete. That's it. So delete that. Yep, keep that. So I think that is pretty good. It's looking nice so far. Let's check the profile page one more time. We need to do anything in here. Let's see. Okay, I think this should be kind of like mishandled this a little bit, I believe. So, okay. So prompt. I don't know why prompt is small right now. So, okay, so there's that. We are going to be almost finishing it up, I believe. So, yeah, great progress so far. I think we need to just do the main page. So we're gonna do that right now. We'll go back to the main page, which is the home page, home prompt, and we are going to start building this component right now. So let's start working on this. So auto w 6/12. And here we're gonna do the form for input search. Going to do type text place folder is equal to search for tag or prompt tag or prompt text. Value is search. Gonna start working on this a little bit. For now, just keep the dummy text in there. Let's come back to that. Required class name, search input. We have search input in here. We are also going to create some use state in here, so it's definitely going to be a client component. So use state snippet. First one is going to be search text, which is going to be an empty first. We are also going to create another one. Bring the use state. Use state snippet. This is going to be search result. So an empty array. And we're also going to handle some debounds. So we're going to create another snippet. Search timeout. It's going to be false to handle the debound thing. So what we're trying to do here is how we are trying to handle this. This is going to be the search text. and this they're also going to be on change. So whenever we type something, we're going to have handle search change function, and in here we are going to be doing is handling the search. So let's create that function. How we decide to do that? So event there. So that's a good I think the function how we do. First need to clear the timeout. So every time we hit this, we need to clear the old timeout and start a new one. So clear timeout is going to be search timeout, and we're going to do is set search text is equal to either target.value, and then we're going to do is set search timeout. So this is a debounce function. That means whenever user types something on the search, we're going to wait a few seconds and then find that data. So we're not going to make it really crazy. Every time we type a word, we are not going to fetch the data. We're going to wait a second so user finish typing some data like next.js, then we're going to fetch the data. If you type one word and fetch the data, it's like too many data happening at the same time. So we want to minimize that using the debounce function, and this is that function. So we do here is first thing we do is set timeout. And here is cons search result is equal to filter prompt. So we're going to create a function that's going to filter through the prompt and make sure we are finding the right keyword. Then we're going to search results into the search results. So after we filter everything out, and we're going to add like 300 millisecond in there. So let's create a filter function. So how we want to filter the data, filter prompts equal to search text in here. It's going to take in that. And after that, it's going to, we do some regex in here. So we're going to do that. And this basically clear it out a little bit. And then we just return all prompts, which is going to be out of the state for sure, which is going to be the main state after we do like the fetch. So use state snippet is going to be all prompts empty, and all prompts dot filter item. So we're going to filter through all that regex dot test item dot tag or regex dot test item dot prompt. So whichever we have, we want to go through that, filter through that, and return that into the filter prompt. And the filter prompt will basically take in this and the prompts. Yep. So this is how it's going to work. We also need to make sure we fetch this as well. So yep, let's do that, and then I'll explain what we did here so we have like a good understanding of what is going on. Make sure we have user effect as well. So const, we do fetch prompt in here. So first we load up this page. We want to fetch the prompt. The response, go to await fetch, and we're going to go to API/prompt or prompts, and then const data is equal to await response JSON, and then we're going to set all prompts to the data we just fetch. So we have to create this route again. So this is getting all the prompts that we have in our database. and then we are putting it in here. And after that, we're going to be displaying it in here. But if users search something in here, we are going to filter those prompt out. So this is filter happening with the targeted word in the search input. Every time this search next.js is going to go in here, and the filter prompt is going to trigger the filter, and it's going to go through the all prompt, which is fetched from here, and it's going to filter out those prompts that have this certain word, which is any of this word, it's a tag or prompt, and then we're going to filter out, and we're going to change the search result to this. So we're going to have search result inserted in here. And we're going to have a new data with the filter prompt in here. So we're going to have new data with the filtered prompt in there. So a lot of things going on in here, a lot of crazy stuff for sure. Let's create this route first. Go here. Oh, we already have a route called prompt, so let's not create another one. We just create inside here. So we have in prompt, and then we have a route. So this is where we're going to start implementing the get all prompt. So bring prompt from model / prompt, and also bring connect.db. utils / connect.db, and we're going to start getting our probably don't need requests, but let me put it. So this is the get all prompt route. Again, try catch here. So first thing we're gonna do is await connect.db, connect to our DB database, and then prompts is equal to await. We're gonna find all the prompts. Just get all of them and find it, and then we're gonna sort them using upvote. Whichever one have bigger upvote, we sort it out, and then we're gonna return all the prompt. That's it. So JSON the stringify again, and status of 200. There we have it. If you don't, do an error. Let's say fail to fetch all prompts. So 500. And yeah, that's good. And let's see what we're doing over here. So we're fetching it. I hope this shows up. So we also want to make sure we are fetching it in the right places in here. So we go back to our page, home prompt, and we start creating whatever we want to display in here after the form. So now we have two things. If the user is searching something, that means they have some search text, we are going to be using the filter prompt. If not, we're going to be using the all prompt. So we have two different prompts. Filtered, this is filtered by search word. This is non-filtered one. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to filter search result dot map single prompt. Then we're going to do prompt card. See, we fetch that from card, and then we have passing everything in here. Single prompt. We also want to do the set upvote because otherwise it won't. Want to make sure we get a good user experience. So we have to create this again. So how to is use state again. You can copy from that page, to be honest. Just copy this. So we have that, passing it in here. We do a very similar thing, just a little different. But this time we're gonna do all prompt instead. So two different routing happening over there. So we go. Let's go check it out. So use effect, we want this to happen. We haven't called this function yet, so we gotta do that. So if session is the user is logged in, we have the ID, then do the fetch prompt and update this when user logged in, and also when onboard state is changed. We don't have the session, so just be in the session as well. But this should be database, so definitely. So we're grabbing the data, which is pretty cool. It's also interactive. We delete that, we should be deleted as well. We shouldn't find anything in here. So pretty cool. Let's so when user is signed in, we shouldn't be showing them that. So we need to fix that part a little bit. Should be in there. So user signed out, we're showing them that. User signed in. No more of that. Let's start creating some application. Let's start creating some prompt. Create a resume for web developer using NextJS. Stack resume. Enter. We have one. How does server action in NextJS work? NextJS. Create some bullet points that says why NextJS is better. Again, NextJS. Then we vote all of them. And then we log out. We sign in with another user. Oh, he's seeing this. He didn't upvote this yet, but he's seeing this, which is cool. He goes to his profile. His profile is empty. Your prompt is empty. Click on the create prompt to create one. He goes back. He's like, oh, this is pretty good. I upvote this. Let me upvote that. So that moves up the top. It's sorted out to the top automatically, which is cool. He also starts searching, like he search resume. Oh, looks like search is broken for some reason. So the regex, the filter item is not working for some reason. So let's go back to that and see what we missed. So return all prompts. We are missing, it's just missing spelling. Oh my god. So there we have it. Okay, it should work now. So he goes in there, he's typing resume pops up. He type in bullet point. The bullet point pops up. What else was there? He types in server action pops up. This is pretty cool. So now he tries to create a prompt. Let's say, how do I create a full stack app with Next.js? Full stack enter. He likes his own upvotes. He upvoted movie on the top. Goes to profile, and this is his upvote. He create another one. He test. Oh, he didn't like this. He goes back to profile. He's like, oh, I created this by mistake. I'm gonna delete that. So he delete that out. So this is the app. Is game changer, like how NextJS kind of came together with their server action with the new feature. You see, we created a lot of cool features for this app, and you can also go crazy. You can also like add your own features to it. You can add your profile features where people can view each other profile. I did that on my previous Twitter clone application. So if you guys are new to this channel, make sure you check out my other tutorials. I have a Twitter clone tutorial where we did a whole course on cloning the Twitter app. We also have a couple of cool TailwindCSS course. So check out those videos. Make sure you download the free guide that I set up for you guys. It's totally free. Just click on the link and put your email, and I'm gonna send you that guide to email. And make sure you like and comment and subscribe. Let me know how your app turned out. If you have any issues, let me know in the comment down below. Also, let me know how you like this app. Do you want me to make more app like this, full stack application? And yeah, more Next.js tutorial, what do you like? And make sure you try it out. You add your own twist to the app. You give your own personality in the app. And yep, stay tuned for more tutorial. I'll be coming up with more work. And yep, take care.